You're listening to Med Evidence, Truth Behind the Data, 4-part series on longevity. Can medical research help us live longer? Such a great question. Dr. Michael Koren, founder and CEO of ENCORE Research Group and a practicing cardiologist, joining us today. He has been principal investigator of over 2,500 clinical trials and published extensively in the most prestigious journals in the world. Our guest today also joining us, Dr. Victoria Helow, a well-respected pediatrician, also clinical research investigator who also practices in the emergency room. So thank you both. We left part 2 talking about longevity, and we're really talking about the maximize healthy lifestyle, which is number 2 of a 3-part simple solution, right?
Yeah.
And if you just want to go back over those top 3, then we'll jump back into, let's do some fishing.
Yeah. What's that expression? Speaking of fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a big fish guy, and not a big fisherman, just a big fish guy. And the fish actually applies to all the 3 secrets. So avoiding hazardous things, just to remind everybody.
Fishing.
Fishing is a lot less hazardous than skydiving.
Right.
So that's, although even in fishing, if you take a boat out 50 miles and the Coast Guard's not aware of it and you don't have the proper safety equipment, et cetera, that would be considered a hazardous thing.
Absolutely.
And it's lots of sun exposure,
There we go. And we'll
true.
talk more about that. So, but in general, fishing is a healthy thing, and you're avoiding hazardous things. Maximizing healthy lifestyles, getting up, getting about, working on a boat, those are all really good things that help us keep fit and part of a good, healthy lifestyle. And we'll talk a lot more about is discovering relevant medical evidence and applying its wisdom. And I think I left the last segment talking about the DART study, which was this great study out of the UK, showing that just the advice of eating fish after a heart attack resulted in improved survival. And Vicki might want to jump in a little bit in terms of some of the other dietary elements of these studies that have been proven to actually help people live longer.
Well, the fish, as you said, and the oils that are associated with that, and the benefits of eating vegetables along with that, extra virgin olive oil, and then things like nuts, of course, healthy nuts, such as walnuts and pecans and almonds, even cashews, but avoiding things like, maybe not necessarily avoiding, but limiting things like peanuts, because in actuality, peanuts are not a nut. They are a legume. They're related to peas more than they're related to nuts, and the oils in those are not healthy.
And that's important for the audience to know, is that there's actually been quite a bit of nutritional research. And the group of people who live the longest are pesco-vegetarians. So there's no benefit to veganism from a data standpoint compared to pesco-vegetarianism. And if you look at cultures where they live the longest, like Japan or the southern Europe, the Mediterranean basin, they eat a lot of fish. They don't fry it. They don't put bacon on it. They don't
cream it up.
Yeah.
Is it the omega-3? I mean, what is the omega-3 that you read about in eating a lot of salmon, for example?
Well, the omega-3 is a fat that's especially healthy for the brain and for all of our cells. All of our cells have fats in them, so you do need to take in the fats that your body can use. But actually, taking those as supplements is a great way to go, as well as then eating them in the form of the fish types that we eat. But it's also just a combination of taking in some animal proteins along with those vegetables, and that is making that diet particularly healthful versus just a straight vegetarian diet.
Yeah, I would just add that we can do a whole podcast, an hour podcast on omega-3 fatty acids and the different research. And we've been involved in studies that have looked at different types of omega-3 fatty acids to determine whether or not they reduce heart attack or stroke after if you're at high risk.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is that they seem to have some benefit, but a lot of the details are still vigorously debated amongst cardiologists and other physicians. So if people are interested, they can come in. We can talk to them about some of the lipid work that we're doing, including work on triglycerides and the issues about omega-3 fatty acids. But probably the most general thing to say at this level is that omega-3 fatty acids are a form of monounsaturated fats. And monounsaturated fats are generally anti-inflammatory, which is very, very important in terms of living longer. So we like to bring in foods that reduce the amount of inflammation in our bodies, whereas saturated fats, like you get in animals, is pro-inflammatory. So this concept of certain foods being anti-inflammatory versus pro-inflammatory is very, very important. And omega-3s tend to be anti-inflammatory. Olive oil and fish oil are probably the two best.
Okay.
Simple advice.
Yeah.
Make your fish, put some olive oil on it, and you'll live forever.
Yeah.
Over a salad.
Over a
With the
salad.
proper
Over a salad.
greens.
Right. And walnuts are
some-
a good
Yes.
crunchy part for your salad.
And you can add a little ginger dressing on it,
There you
and that's
go.
still good. And put sprinkle it with some nuts.
Sounds great. Let's go to
Not
lunch.
peanuts.
And some lemon for the vitamin C, which is also crucial.
There you go.
Right.
And,
So you hit all the healthy foods in one meal.
yeah, and it's
And
darn
have it
good.
5 times a day and you're set.
I like that idea. So, what else about the living the healthy lifestyle? And we talked a lot about exercise and the need to do that, but we kind of touched a little bit on the sunscreen and the sun. We live in Florida. We are fortunate to have the sun all the time, except on some few ugly days. But what about keeping that as part of our life and longevity?
That is part of avoiding the hazardous things, is to avoid the sun. But we do need sun. We need sun to be able to adequately use vitamin D and calcium. So we do need to get out in the sun, but we need to do it wisely. And doing that wisely does include using some sunscreen, minimizing the amount of time you're out there. Talking about inflammation and destruction, when you get a sunburn, you're causing inflammation and destruction in the skin, which sets you up for further problems. But some of the things also to keep into account is not just going out on that boat and using the sunscreen, but our everyday life, sitting in the car, driving, and the left side getting all of that sun coming in on us, and that can be detrimental. And then we need to look back at these risk factors as well as risk markers. And we have different risk markers even for the sun. Just as he was talking about risk markers, you can be physiologically addicted and have a marker for nicotine that you're addicted to that, and then your behaviors are the risk factors of taking in these toxins associated with that. Well, some of our risk markers are fair people with red hair, green eyes is going to subject you to a greater risk of damage due to the sun, and so you have to really minimize that risk factor of the sun exposure.
Right. So skin tone would be a risk marker. They're more people that have light skin tones are more likely to get melanoma, but the risk factor is actually the sun. And it's a preventable or modifiable risk factor because you can use sunscreen, which has been proven by medical evidence. And the stronger the sunscreen, the more likely it is that you'll avoid the damaging UV radiation that causes melanoma and other skin cancers. So all that's been proven. And then, of course, if you're somebody who's a bit vain, we all are, sun also is responsible for wrinkles. And so longevity is certainly part of it, and avoiding hazardous things like the sun is part of it, but we also want to live healthier, happier, and prettier lifestyles. and that's another reason to avoid the sun. And then you get back into medical evidence, which is that there are certain things that have been shown to help wrinkles and to help the skin. For example, retin A is one that has been proven critically in clinical trials, and there's a lot of stuff that gets hawked out there that's never been proven.
Right. I was going to say anti-aging creams. Can we turn back the clock on our faces and our wrinkles? Is there evidence behind that?
There is evidence behind that. Like you said, retin A is one of the ones that has been proven to turn back that and not just make it look better, but makes it healthier overall. And so it, lasts longer, and you do stay prettier longer, but there's also some anti-inflammatory effects of that and protective against things like cancer.
Mm-hmm. And then that's a good segue into one of the very, very interesting concepts epidemiologically, which is why women live longer than men. So we can talk a little bit about that, but that wasn't always the case. 150 years ago, women didn't live longer than men. But because of advances in medical science, that has changed. Vicki probably could jump in a little bit about that.
Yeah. Again, we determine how long somebody lives by taking the average of all of the people, and women in the past would die during childbirth or shortly thereafter, and with medical advances we've taken care of that, and so that factor has gone away. Similar to younger people not avoiding accidents and dying can sometimes make the longevity look a little bit lower. But women live longer on the other end of it because they tend to have more active lifestyles than men do, just in their daily, everyday activities, and they tend to eat better than men do. And I think men don't maybe even worry about their weight as much and that women do. So there's multiple factors contributing to that, but overall they do eat better. That's scientifically been
validated,
and the data is out there that they eat healthier. Not necessarily all the motivations behind that fact, but it is associated with greater longevity.
Yeah, they're less likely to climb ladders.
Yes.
It sounds like Dr. Helow likes to get up on the roof and clean the gutters.
We have to work on that.
Profession that I will not do that anymore.
But that's also interesting. I'm a little bit of a data nerd. I like to look at
not you, not 2,500
I confess.
clinical trials. I mean, come on.
Yes, I for fun on the weekends I look at longevity tables. I admit to that. I'm sorry. But
is that what I have printed here? These tables of longevity.
Yeah.
I can't read them.
We've got to look at that medical evidence and then apply its wisdom. So if we're just going to take something from Facebook and not really take the medical evidence, then are we really applying true wisdom and making that?
It's kind of sad. When I go to the bar on the weekend, the bartender will ask me what I'd like to have, and I say, "Do you have any PowerPoint slides?"
Oh no!
Yikes.
Oh no! So
it really is almost that nerdy, folks.
Well, I find it very interesting about the women living longer. My grandmother has definitely outlived my grandfather, and they were both very healthy. But what about our relationships? The women's relationship with our children and with our parents, and maybe being a caregiver, is that affecting longevity? And that can even go back to my notes say sex and relationships.
No doubt.
Intimacy.
Yeah. There's no doubt that relationships have a huge impact on longevity. Married people tend to live longer than unmarried people. And sex is I'm not sure if it's a marker or a risk factor, but it's certainly a marker for longevity. So people that tend to have sex more tend to live longer. And it would be hard to do studies on that, but I'm sure we'll get a lot of volunteers for it.
They did them. They started them way back. There was that show.
Yeah, Masters and Johnson. Yeah,
exactly.
It's actually a shame. Masters and Johnson did some really, really interesting research, and they actually did research that involved observing people having sex, and that started in the 1950s.
Right.
And for whatever reason, by the 1970s, it became considered out of favor. But it's actually an important physiological act, and there's a lot that can be learned. And I think we've actually lost something because we don't do research observing people having sex.
Well, I think that goes back to what you were saying about intimacy. I mean, people crave touch and conversation, and maybe with the pandemic, we lost some of that, and hopefully that will start to come back. What can you say about that? Because it kind of hit that in the maximize healthy lifestyle too, but there's a lot of wisdom behind it as well.
Yeah, it's actually particularly important in men, by the way. The data seem to show that unmarried men versus married men have a much bigger difference than married women versus unmarried women. But having regular intimacy, touch, etc., is probably important. And again, we know that just touch and sex stimulates all these very positive hormones and dopamine and other things that help us feel better, live longer, probably reduce inflammation, and lead to longer lives.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly which variable is at work is not what's clear, and we would love to have more research on that because, again, are those women that are single living longer because, like you said, they have closer relationships with their children, they have closer relationships with their girlfriends who they'll be intimate with, to a certain extent telling secrets or really getting off their chest what might be bothering them, whereas men don't tend to do that, and all of those probably weigh in exactly how much. We don't have the research to delineate.
And those are difficult things to research. We'll keep on trying, but in our next segment, I guess we'll talk very specifically about some of the really exciting research findings in recent years.